Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be looking into the Wrong Turn franchise again, but this time I'm going to be looking at the kills in the movies for Wrong Turn. There are 7 films in the franchise. I did do a ranking for the movies a few years ago before the semi-remake came out in 2021 or 2022, and this time I'm going to be ranking the kills in each of the movies. We're going to obviously start off with the original from 2003. Luckily, there is an even 10 in the first Wrong Turn movie. As the movies progress, they get a little bit more convoluted and there's a lot of kills to get through. But at least for the first one, just easing us into it, there's only 10, which is a good top 10. And at number 10 is Evan. I think his death would have been better if it was on screen. I know that sometimes you can say to yourself, well, I think we can leave it to the imagination as to what happened, but with the Wrong Turn franchise being what it is now and knowing what we know now, I think it would have been better to see Evan's death. Now, I know that the budget for Wrong Turn wasn't massive, so a lot of the deaths had to happen off screen. In fact, more than half of the deaths on this list happen actually off screen and you don't see it. So Evan is the one for me because it's a missed opportunity. That's the only difference between this one and the other off-screen deaths, is Evan's one was a missed opportunity because we got to see his ear before we saw his body. So I would have liked to have seen how it happened. How cool would it have been to see them cutting off his ear? Very grotesque, and it would have been good to see. So Evan, for me, is the worst one. And at number 9 is Rich, and it's similar to Evan where you kind of see an off-screen death, but you also see a bit of an on-screen death. You see what happens to him and you know exactly what's about to happen to him, but then obviously you just see his body lying in the bottom. But what we don't see, which would have been cool to see, was what was happening to him at the top of the cliff. It would have been cool to see that. I understand that they didn't want to show the mountain men at this point because it was the beginning of the movie, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of what happened to him up the top before they get thrown off. Even seeing the hands of the mountain men, because you do see that throughout the film, it would have been cool to see that as well. But because we only saw a semi-aftermath of what happened to Rich, then that's why he's lower down on the list. And also falling off a cliff in a horror film, it's not great because you're not really dying at the hands physically of the killer, you're dying because of the fall. And at number 8 is Hallie, the girlfriend slash wife of Rich, and it's similar to Rich because we don't really see much happening as she's tumbling down this little cliff, and it looks like she's about to get away, and the only reason that her death was higher on this list than Rich's was because we do see a little bit of action because she's running away. She trips up on the razor wire, so we know that this is intentional, and then you see her getting dragged away. So even though you don't see the death on screen, it's got more of an effect because we know she's about to be killed by these mountain men. That's the only difference that I have between her and Rich. And at number 7 is the cop at the very end of the film. Now this one is a mid-credit scene before mid-credits became popular. After the end credits started rolling, it cuts to a police officer going towards the burned building, and then we see Three Finger behind them with the axe, and then as you can see the light shining on Three Finger's face, we don't see the death on screen. It's one of these off-screen deaths, but we can assume that he did die because the noise that you hear after you see Three Finger's face. And I think the reason this is only higher up was because of the impact it had, because it was a surprise kill at the very end of the film. You get to see Three Finger's face up close, him laughing and screaming, and then swinging the axe. So I think it was a cool scene because it was a great build-up, but at the end of the day, you don't see the death, so the kill has to be lower on the list. But still, if that was an off-screen death and the only off-screen death in the film, I thought it was pretty good. I'm going to put number 5 and 6 together, One Eye and Sawtooth, because they both died at the same time and they both died in the same manner. And their death eventually was off-screen because they blew up because of what Chris done. But their death was cool because it started off with a fight, they were getting chopped up, etc., but nothing was killing them. They kept getting back up, and Chris and Carly were like, we have to get out of here because we can't kill these guys. And there's nothing to say that these guys didn't physically die because we don't see their bodies really, but we can assume that they died because there was an explosion and we didn't know if they survived or not after that with the next films. So we can assume that they did die. They died through an explosion, but ultimately we didn't see them dying. We didn't see them exploding, we just saw it from the outside. But because they both died together, then it's a tie between those two. And at number 4 is Scott, and our first official on-screen death, can you believe it, at number 4? And that's the death of Scott. So he's running through the woods, and it looks like he's about to get to the car with the rest of the survivors, but he stops, and we're like, why is he stopping? And at first, when I first watched it, I was like, why is he stopping? But then you can see that he's obviously been hurt. And as we find out that he's been shot through the stomach with the arrow, we see the final blow going right through, and the rest of them have to watch on as he gets killed and he gets dragged away. There's nothing that they can do because these mountain men, we don't know what they're capable of, and they just drag his body away and they have to drive away. So that was a cool scene, a cool death, and our first official on-screen one. And number 3 was the trooper. Now this one was the quickest death in the entire film, but I think that its impact was pretty cool because I didn't see it coming. I knew he was going to die because when a trooper shows up halfway through a movie, you know they're going to die, but I didn't know he was going to die so fast, and I didn't know he was going to die in the vein that he did. And he was just standing there talking to Chris, and then all of a sudden the arrow goes right through his eye. It was perfect. It was a great scene because it was a kind of jump scene as well, because I'm like, oh, holy crap. And then obviously you see one of the mountain men in the woods looking down, looking to get Chris. So it was a great impact moment because I didn't see it coming, and it was quick, short and sweet. And then number 2 is Francine. I think Francine might have got the worst death in the entire film because we don't know how long it took for her to die. She did get caught near the beginning of the film where she got the razor wire through her mouth, which was bad enough. As she was looking down, she saw Evan's ear, and then she got attacked from behind. She probably died very soon after that, but we don't know. But we see her body getting dragged into the cabin later on, and they start cutting off one of her legs. She's obviously dead at this point because her body was put on the floor, but we don't know how long it took for her to die. However, her death was horrendous. Having the razor wire put through your mouth would be absolutely horrendous because number 1 on the list, which we'll talk about, that person would have died instantly, whereas Francine wouldn't have died instantly. She would have taken a long time to die, or a longer time to die than number 1, and getting that razor wire through your mouth, getting dragged away and knowing what's going to happen to you would have been absolutely horrendous. And obviously seeing her dismembered body later on in the film was just kind of added to that death scene. And then number 1 is Carly. Yes, the best death for me is Carly in the film because I saw it coming, but I didn't know it was going to be so impactful when I saw it. And just seeing Three Finger coming up behind with that axe, I knew that he was going to do something. I thought he was going to chop her head off, but it wasn't quite the head. He got right through the mouth. And what made this one great was the fact that the whole body fell off the tree into the ground, and her head stayed on there just for a little bit longer until it slid off that axe. I think it was a great scene. I think what helped as well is I watched the making of Wrong Turn, and I watched how they made that scene. And for a film that came out in 2003, with the budget they had, and for the fact that it was a horror film, I think they spent a lot of time on that, a lot of time and effort, and the final product was great. It was fantastic. I also find it more disturbing that her friends were there watching her and seeing it happen, and there's nothing that they can do about it, because if they tried, they probably would have died as well. They could have put up a fight, but they were on a tree against a guy who probably lived in the trees his entire life, and you can see that Three Fingers can get up and down trees dead easily. So for them to try and take him on after he's done that to Carly, or even before he's done it to Carly, there's nothing they can do, and that's what made it worse, and that's what made the kill better, was people were watching and there's simply nothing that they can do about it. So that's every kill ranked in the Wrong Turn film, guys. Pretty straightforward because, like I said, most of the kills were off screen. But what is your best kill in the film? You don't have to rank them all. Just give me maybe your top 1, 2 or 3 kills in the movie. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. And I'll talk to you soon.
Meeting adjourned.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back!